My name is Natalie Brooks. I was 32 years old when my grandfather handed me a faded check for $200,000 at my wedding. Before I could even touch it, my mother snatched it out of his trembling hand, held it high for everyone to see, and laughed. "Look at this, everybody. $200,000 from a man who went bankrupt 10 years ago." The guests laughed with her. Then she turned toward me, smiled as though she were giving the perfect wedding toast, and said the sentence I will remember for the rest of my life. "This is all you're worth, sweetheart." My older sister immediately lifted her phone and started recording. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't embarrass my grandfather by defending him. I simply took the old check back, folded it carefully, slipped it into the inside pocket of my husband's jacket, and finished our first dance while almost everyone in the room believed they had just witnessed the most pathetic wedding gift in history. My wedding took place on Saturday, September 20th, 2025. It was the first cool Saturday after a long Pennsylvania summer. The ceremony was held at an old stone estate outside Sewickley, about 30 minutes northwest of downtown Pittsburgh. The venue overlooked the Ohio River. Maple trees surrounded the property, their leaves only beginning to turn golden. It wasn't extravagant. My husband, Ethan Carter, and I had paid for almost everything ourselves. We wanted something elegant but simple. 132 guests. A string quartet, a small outdoor ceremony, dinner inside the restored carriage house. Ethan was 34. He worked as a structural engineer for one of the largest bridge design firms in western Pennsylvania. We had met 4 years earlier during a charity fundraising event after one of the city's major floods. He was the calmest person I had ever known. Even when everyone around him panicked, Ethan somehow made problems feel smaller simply by standing beside them. That quality saved me more times than he probably realized. Especially on my wedding day. Because no one knew my family better than Ethan. No one knew how dangerous appearances could be. My grandfather's name was Arthur Bennett. He was 79 years old. Most people in Pittsburgh remembered him as the man who had once owned Bennett Construction Group. For almost 30 years, his company had built schools, hospitals, municipal buildings, libraries, and office towers throughout western Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio. In the late 1990s, Bennett Construction employed more than 600 workers. Arthur Bennett wasn't just wealthy. He was respected. Then came 2015. 3 commercial projects collapsed almost simultaneously after a national developer defaulted on hundreds of millions of dollars in financing. Arthur had personally guaranteed several construction loans. Within 11 months, his company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Every local newspaper covered the story. People said he had lost everything. The newspapers estimated his personal losses at nearly $43 million. His mansion was sold. His vacation property disappeared. Luxury cars vanished. The company was liquidated. The Bennett name disappeared from every construction site in Pennsylvania. That was 10 years before my wedding. Since then, everyone, including my own mother, treated my grandfather as though he were a man living on memories. He rented a modest 2-bedroom house. He drove a 12-year-old Ford Explorer. He wore the same brown leather jacket every winter. If anyone asked how he was doing financially, he always smiled and answered the same way. "I'm comfortable." No one believed him. My mother certainly didn't. Her name was Victoria Bennett. She had inherited my grandmother's talent for looking graceful in public while making people feel small in private. She had built a successful luxury real estate business in Pittsburgh after my grandfather's bankruptcy. If you listened to her speak for 5 minutes, you would think she had built everything herself. She rarely mentioned that my grandfather had paid for her college education, or that he had helped her buy her first office, or that he had guaranteed her first business loan. Those details disappeared from family conversations long ago. My sister Madison was 36. She was a corporate attorney in Philadelphia. Successful, confident, beautiful, and completely devoted to our mother's version of history. According to them, my grandfather had destroyed the family fortune through incompetence. According to my grandfather, he had never told us the whole story. I wouldn't understand why until the morning after our wedding weekend. My father died when I was 16. His name was Daniel Brooks. He wasn't related to the Bennett family by blood. He married my mother when he was 26. Everyone who knew him trusted him, especially my grandfather. When Dad died unexpectedly from a heart attack at only 48 years old, something changed inside Arthur Bennett. He became quieter, less interested in defending himself. He stopped correcting people whenever they blamed him for the bankruptcy. At the time, I thought grief had simply exhausted him. Years later, I realized silence had become part of a much larger plan. About 2 weeks before my wedding, my grandfather called me. "Natalie." "Yes, Grandpa?" "I have your wedding gift. You don't have to buy me anything." I didn't. I laughed. "Then what is it?" "You'll understand when the time comes." "What does that mean?" "It means..." He paused. "Promise me something." "Anything. No matter what anyone says, don't throw it away." I smiled. "I promise." He didn't explain further. Looking back now, that phone call lasted less than 3 minutes, yet every single word mattered. The ceremony itself was perfect. The September air was cool. The sunlight reflected off the river below. Ethan cried before I did. Only a little. Just enough to make everyone laugh. For almost 6 hours, I actually believed my family would behave themselves. I should have known better. Trouble always waited until everyone had gathered. Dinner had just finished. The band was preparing for our first dance. Guests were chatting around candlelit tables. My grandfather slowly stood from his chair. Age had bent his shoulders, but not his dignity. He walked across the reception hall, holding a plain white envelope. Not a wrapped gift, not a box. Just an envelope. His hands trembled slightly as he reached me. "Natalie." "Yes, Grandpa. I've waited a very long time to give you this." He held out the envelope. I reached for it. I never touched it, because my mother stepped between us. She smiled sweetly. "Oh, Dad, let me see what amazing treasure you've brought." Before either of us could react, she took the envelope from his hand. She opened it, pulled out a faded check, looked at the amount, and burst into laughter. Everything in the room became silent. She held the check above her head. $200,000. Someone near the back actually whistled. My mother laughed even harder. "Does everyone remember when Dad declared bankruptcy?" Several people nodded awkwardly. She turned the old check toward the guests. "It's dated June 12, 2015. Another laugh. Then she looked directly at me. "This is all you're worth, sweetheart." Madison was already recording. Someone near the bar quietly whispered, "That's cruel." But nobody stopped her. Not one person. Except my grandfather. He didn't defend himself. He didn't defend me. He simply looked at me with tears in his eyes, as though the only opinion that mattered was mine. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The string quartet had already stopped playing. Even the waitstaff froze where they stood. My mother looked around the room, clearly enjoying the attention. "You know," she said loudly, "Dad always had a flair for dramatic gestures." She held the check between 2 fingers as though it were something dirty. Except this one bounced 10 years ago. Several guests chuckled uncomfortably. A few lowered their eyes. Others stared at my grandfather. Arthur Bennett never looked at my mother. He only looked at me. His eyes were tired, not ashamed, not defeated. Just tired. As though he had expected this exact moment for years. Madison zoomed in with her phone. "Oh my God," she laughed. "This is definitely going into the family group chat." Ethan quietly stepped beside me. I felt his hand touch the small of my back, not to pull me away, just to remind me I wasn't standing there alone. My mother shook the old check again. $200,000. She laughed. "Dad, First Commonwealth closed that corporate account after your bankruptcy." She looked around proudly. "Everyone knows that." Then she smiled directly at me. "I guess this is what happens when your wedding gift comes from a bankrupt old man." More awkward laughter. Not because people found it funny. Because nobody knew what else to do. I slowly walked toward my mother. She seemed almost excited. She thought I was finally going to lose my temper. Instead, I simply held out my hand. She stared at me. "What?" "The check, Natalie." "The check." For a moment she considered refusing. Then she realized every guest was watching. If she kept it, she would look worse than she already did. She dropped it into my hand. There. I hope you frame it. So do I answered. She blinked. It was probably the last response she expected. I carefully folded the check along its original crease. The paper was old. Soft around the edges. Someone had clearly protected it for years. I slid it into the inside pocket of Ethan's suit jacket. Then I turned toward the band. We're ready. The bandleader looked confused. For the first dance? Yes. He nodded slowly. 30 seconds later, music filled the room again. Ethan wrapped his arms around me. The guests slowly returned to their conversations. Behind us, I could hear my sister laughing while replaying the video she had just recorded. Ethan leaned close enough that nobody else could hear him. What do you want to do? Tomorrow morning. About what? The check. You think it's real? I don't know, but Grandpa wanted me to have it. He nodded once, then we'll find out. That was the end of the conversation. We danced the rest of the song in silence. The reception ended shortly after 10:30. Instead of leaving for our full honeymoon that night, Ethan and I had planned to spend Sunday at a small hotel nearby before flying to Italy. As guests collected their coats, my grandfather quietly touched my elbow. Walk with me. We stepped outside onto the stone terrace overlooking the river. Most of the lights from the reception hall glowed behind us. The September air felt cold after the crowded ballroom. Arthur reached into his jacket pocket. He handed me a small brass key. It wasn't a house key. It was much smaller. A bank safe deposit key. 5 numbers had been engraved into one side. He closed my fingers around it. On Monday morning, he spoke so quietly I almost didn't hear him. Go to First Commonwealth National, the downtown Pittsburgh branch. Ask for Richard Holloway. I don't know anyone by that name. He knows you. I frowned. How could he know me? He promised me 20 years ago that if you ever walked through those doors carrying that check, my grandfather stopped. He swallowed. He would do exactly what I asked. Your name is already on the trust paperwork as the primary successor, Natalie. That check and this key are just the final verification he needs. I stared at him. Grandpa, he shook his head. Don't ask me tonight. There are too many ears. What is the key for? You'll see. Can I tell Mom? His answer came immediately. No. What about Madison? No. Ethan? A small smile crossed his face. Bring Ethan. Only Ethan. He squeezed my shoulder. Promise me one more thing. I promise. No matter what happens, read everything before you sign anything. I nodded. I will. He looked relieved. Then, for the first time all evening, he smiled. Not a big smile. Just enough to remind me of the grandfather who used to take me fishing every summer before the bankruptcy changed everything. As he turned to leave, I noticed something strange. He walked more slowly than I remembered. Older, frail, almost fragile. For the first time in my life, I wondered how much time I had left with him. Neither Ethan nor I slept much that weekend. By Monday morning, September 22nd, we were driving toward downtown Pittsburgh. The old check rested inside a waterproof document folder on my lap. The brass key lay beside it. Ethan glanced over. You've looked at that thing at least 20 times. I know. What are you thinking? I'm thinking none of this makes sense. The account was closed. That's what everyone says. And yet your grandfather kept this check for 10 years. Exactly. If you want to know how this mystery unfolds, take a brief moment to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this family's deepest secrets. We crossed the Fort Pitt Bridge just after 8. The Pittsburgh skyline rose ahead of us through the morning mist. At precisely 8:42 a.m., Ethan parked across the street from First Commonwealth National Bank. The building itself had stood there since the early 1980s. Dark granite. Bronze doors. Tall windows reflecting the surrounding office towers. The branch opened at 9. We waited in the car. Neither of us spoke very much. At exactly 9:01, we walked inside. The lobby was almost empty. A young teller greeted us with a smile. Good morning. How can I help you? I need to speak with Richard Holloway. The teller looked confused. "May I ask what this is regarding?" I removed the old check from the folder. "I believe he has been expecting this." She accepted it politely. Her smile disappeared almost immediately. She examined the front, then the back. She looked at the account number, then at me. Her expression changed completely. "I'll be right back." She disappeared through a secured door behind the teller stations. Ethan looked at me. "You noticed that?" I did. Less than 1 minute later, 3 people walked out together. The young teller, a gray-haired man in a navy suit, and another man wearing an executive name badge. The older gentleman stared at the check without saying a word. Then he slowly raised his eyes to mine. His voice was almost a whisper. "Mrs. Brooks." "Yes." "My name is Richard Holloway." He looked at the faded check once more. His hands trembled. Then he asked the question my grandfather had prepared him to ask. Did Arthur finally decide it was time? Before the door to the executive conference room closed behind us, Richard Holloway turned the brass key over in his hand and looked at me for several long seconds. "You have your grandfather's eyes," he finally said. "I've heard that before." "So have I." He unlocked a narrow mahogany cabinet built into the wall and removed a heavy black portfolio. Across the front, embossed in gold letters, were 6 words. "The Bennett Contingency File." Richard placed it on the table but didn't open it immediately. Instead, he slid the faded check toward me. This check was never meant to be cashed. I frowned. My mother said it was worthless. In one sense. He smiled. She was absolutely right. The account it was written on was closed in July 2015. I looked at Ethan. Neither of us understood. Then why did Grandpa keep it? Richard finally opened the portfolio. Because this wasn't a payment. It was a key. Inside the portfolio were more than 50 documents, trust agreements, corporate records, stock certificates, escrow contracts, court filings. Every document had been signed over many years. Some were dated 2015, others 2018, some only months before my wedding. Richard carefully turned the first page toward me. Bennett, Legacy Trust, date established, November 3, 2015, exactly 4 months after my grandfather's bankruptcy. Total initial contribution, 100% ownership of Legacy Infrastructure Holdings, LLC. I had never heard of that company. Richard noticed my confusion. Neither had anyone else. That was intentional. He continued. After Bennett Construction collapsed, your grandfather quietly refused every offer to start another construction company. People believed he had lost everything. They were wrong. He simply decided to build differently. During the bankruptcy proceedings, Arthur Bennett could no longer own a construction business, but nothing prevented him from becoming an investor. Over the next 10 years, he quietly financed dozens of infrastructure projects through private partnerships, bridges, water treatment facilities, industrial warehouses, renewable energy projects. He never put his own name on any company. Instead, he owned minority interests through Legacy Infrastructure Holdings. Every dividend, every profit distribution, every stock appreciation went directly into the trust. Richard looked directly at me. Your grandfather wasn't rebuilding his fortune. He was rebuilding your future. He handed me another document. Current trust valuation, September 19, 2025. 1 day before my wedding. Total assets, $218,463,917.84. I read the number 3 times. Ethan actually leaned closer because he thought he had misread it. $218 million. The room became completely silent. Richard let us absorb it. The check represented $200,000, the very first investment. It was the seed. Your grandfather kept it because he wanted you to remember where everything began. But why keep it secret? I asked. Richard answered immediately. Because your grandfather wanted one thing more than wealth. He wanted certainty. Certainty of what? Of who loved him after the money disappeared. You were already named his successor, Richard explained. But he kept the true scale of the wealth hidden from everyone, waiting to see how they would treat him in his final years before handing over full control. I didn't answer, because I already knew. Arthur Bennett passed away peacefully 11 months later. He was 80. At his funeral, there were no television cameras, no reporters, just family. Old construction workers, former employees, engineers, carpenters, equipment operators. More than 400 people came. Many of them said exactly the same thing. He never stopped helping people. I believed them, because I had finally learned the truth. 2 weeks after the funeral, the entire family gathered for the formal reading of Arthur Bennett's estate plan and the final distribution of the Bennett Legacy Trust. My mother arrived wearing an expensive designer suit. Madison carried a leather notebook filled with legal tabs. Both of them smiled politely. Both of them believed there had simply been some misunderstanding at the bank, and that they were about to claim their share of his hidden millions. The estate attorney began reading. The trust documents were straightforward. Then came the final amendment, signed by my grandfather exactly 3 days after my wedding. The room became silent. The attorney read slowly. Any beneficiary who publicly humiliates, exploits, or intentionally demeans Arthur Bennett, or who demonstrates sustained abandonment of a family relationship for financial advantage, shall automatically forfeit all beneficial interest. My client exercised his right as the trust grantor to formally execute this disinheritance clause upon receiving proof of such behavior. My mother's smile disappeared. Madison sat perfectly still. The attorney continued. Mr. Bennett provided extensive documentation to our firm before his passing. He opened another folder. Inside were photographs, letters, emails, videos, including the recording from my wedding. My sister's own phone had captured every word. "This is all you're worth, sweetheart." The attorney pressed pause. Nobody spoke. Arthur had anticipated everything. For 10 years he had quietly documented every visit, every phone call, every birthday, every holiday. I had visited him nearly every week, sometimes only for coffee, sometimes just to mow his lawn. Madison had visited 3 times in 9 years. My mother had visited only when she wanted him to sign financial paperwork. Every meeting had been logged, every interaction witnessed. The attorney closed the file. The trust conditions have therefore been legally executed during the grantor's lifetime. Mrs. Victoria Bennett, you are removed as beneficiary. Ms. Madison Bennett, you are removed as beneficiary. He turned toward me. Natalie Brooks, you are confirmed as sole beneficiary. My mother stood up so quickly her chair tipped backward. This is ridiculous. We're his family. We will fight this in court. The attorney quietly replied. Mr. Bennett anticipated that argument. The amendment is ironclad, backed by indisputable video evidence of your own making. He also left a personal message. He opened one final envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. Arthur's voice almost echoed through the room as the attorney read aloud. If you are hearing this, it means Natalie stayed exactly as long as I hoped she would. Money never reveals character. Losing money does. The day I filed bankruptcy, I learned who loved me, and who only loved what I owned. Natalie never asked me for $1. She asked me how I was feeling. That is why everything belongs to her. By the time the letter ended, my mother was crying. Not because she missed her father, because she finally understood that she had lost everything. The first decision I made after inheriting the trust wasn't buying a house, or a yacht, or a vacation. Instead, Ethan and I established the Arthur Bennett Skilled Trades Foundation. Every year it pays full tuition for 100 students entering construction, engineering, welding, electrical work, plumbing, and heavy equipment operation throughout Pennsylvania. The second thing we did was repay every retired employee who had lost pension benefits during the bankruptcy. Every single one. Some checks were only a few $1,000s. Others exceeded $200,000. Every recipient received the same handwritten note. My grandfather never forgot you. The old faded check now hangs inside my office. People often ask why I framed a worthless check from a closed account. I always smile, because they still don't understand. The check was never worth $200,000. It was worth something much greater. It proved one simple truth. Everyone at my wedding believed my grandfather had given me the smallest gift in the room. In reality, he had quietly handed me the key to a legacy worth more than $200 million. And my mother? She was right about one thing. She said that old check showed exactly what I was worth. She just didn't realize she was looking at only the first page of the story.